Welcome to Who Yelling Now, Season 4, Episode 10, titled Who Benefits from Civic Amnesia? Copyright Mackenzie. For entertainment purposes only. There is a comforting myth many societies tell themselves. The myth says corruption requires secrecy, that injustice survives only in dark rooms, that exploitation depends on silence. But the older I get, the more I realize something unsettling. Most people already know. Not enough. Not everything. Not the full architecture of the machine. But enough. Enough to feel a hesitation when they swipe their badge at work. Enough to notice contradictions that never quite get explained. Why is this company worth $60 billion? Why do we sell food none of us eat? Why do we build weapons we hope never get used? Why do the same crises return every decade? Somehow more profitable than the last. These questions appear, but rarely for long, because the next thought arrives quickly. Mortgage, tuition, health insurance, retirement. And so the question dissolves, not into ignorance, into something far more human. Quiet permission. You see, most systems do not survive because people are fooled. They survive because millions of small minds make a practical decision every morning. I will not crawl all the way under the bed to see what lives there. I will peek. I will notice just enough to feel uneasy. And then I will stand up, brush the dust from my hands, and go to work. Because survival has a way of persuading conscience to lower its voice. This is not the story of villains. This is the story of something far more powerful. A society that remembers just enough to feel uncomfortable and forgets just enough to keep going. Here is a poem I call Partial Knowing. We do not forget completely. That would require effort. Why the profit grows. We remember halfway, not in the gangway, not in broad daylight, enough to pause, but not enough to refuse the flaws. Who the prophet knows. Enough to raise an eyebrow, but not enough to cry out. How the prophet grows. We remember the warning and the consequence of non-conforming. We remember the doubt, but not the decision of the devout. When the prophet grows. So we file the thought away between lunch and the next gut punch. Watch the prophet grow. A quiet compromise between conscience and convenience. We harmonize to democratize, and in that small space, profit grows. Partial knowing is not an abstract idea. It has an address. It has a parking lot filled every morning at 7:45. It has break rooms and shift bells and payroll departments. It lives in real places, places where people work hard, places where people believe they're doing something useful, places where entire towns quietly organize themselves around one shiny building. If you want to understand civic amnesia, you don't need to imagine secret meetings of dark conspiracy. You only need to visit one of those buildings. Let me introduce you to one. Here is a story titled, "The Building Everyone Depends On." There is a building not far from where you live. You may not notice it at first, but once you see it, you realize how much of the town bends around it. Most of your neighbors work there. That building is the reason the neighborhood looks the way it does. The well-kept parks, the new coffee shop on the corner, the subway station that opened 3 years ago. The schools are good. The sidewalks are clean. The houses hold their value. And the county is proud of that building. They gave the company land to move in, tax incentives, infrastructure upgrades, road expansions. The company now accounts for nearly 60% of the employment in that zip code and the next 3 zip codes over. People say the same thing when they talk about it. That place built this town. Inside the building, thousands of people work every day. You can picture it. The hum of machinery, long bright corridors, workers moving in practiced rhythm. Some stand on the production line wearing uniforms, white coats, hairnets, thick rubber aprons, heavy gloves pulled up past the wrist, splatter mask pulled tightly across the face. You might ask a simple question walking past them. Are they making food? Food for human consumption? The labels say yes. The advertisements say yes. Every day, trucks leave the loading docks filled with products bound for ports and highways. John worked on that line for 9 years. A quiet man, 2 kids, mortgage just manageable. Every day he stood beside the conveyor belt wearing the same rubber gloves and apron. And every day he noticed something strange. The workers in the building rarely ate the product they made. They brought lunch from home or brought something from the cafeteria, but not the product, not the one they shipped by millions. He asked once. Someone laughed. "Don't overthink it, John." So John stopped asking. until the day he got promoted to line supervisor. Small office upstairs, a badge that opened a few more doors. That's when the numbers began appearing. Shipping logs, contract summaries, government agreements. Slowly, the picture became clearer. Only 30% of the product stayed in the country. The rest was shipped abroad to poorer nations, officially labeled as food aid. Government contracts paid the company to produce it. Massive contracts, guaranteed profit margins. Then John saw something else. Another subsidiary, healthcare logistics, medical aid, hospital construction in the same countries receiving the shipments. Another set of government contracts, another revenue stream. He kept scrolling. Then he saw the third company, same corporate parent, different name. Mortuary services, human contamination cleanup, burial and disposal support. Also funded through international aid contracts. John leaned back in his chair. For 9 years, he had carried a quiet question in his gut. Why does nobody here eat the product? Now he had an answer. Downstairs, the machines were still running. Workers were still laughing in the hallway. The trucks were still loading. Outside, the parks were still clean. The schools were still good. The coffee shop on the corner was still full. Because when a building feeds a town learns very quickly not to ask too many questions about what it feeds the rest of the world. John closed the file slowly. For 9 years, he wondered what they were making. Now he knew. And like everyone else in that building, he had to decide how much of that knowledge he could live with tomorrow morning. Most of us grew up with Superman and Clark Kent. Here's an observation I made about that beloved story. An old lesson hidden in the Superman story most of us missed as children. Superman never got paid. Clark Kent did. The hero saved the world, but the man who showed up at the office Monday morning is the one who kept the lights on. And most societies do not run on Superman. They run on Clark Kent. People who know just enough to feel the tension and still grow up tomorrow and show up every day because the mortgage is due. So, my fellow listeners, there is one more uncomfortable truth. Where does the profit go? We imagine it disappearing into the pockets of a few powerful people. Sometimes that is true. But often the money travels through quieter channels. Investment funds, retirement portfolios, municipal accounts, college endowments. Sometimes the same workers who feel uneasy in the lunchroom also hold shares in the company through their pension plan, their 401k, their retirement account, their children's college fund. The system is not only profitable, it's entangled. And that entanglement creates a new kind of silence. Because the moment profit reaches your own future, the question becomes much harder to ask. The most stable systems of profit are not the ones controlled by a few villains. They are the ones quietly owned by everyone. In thinking of us, the everyday worker, here's a poem I call Bought Shell. My conscience vacated before my soul did. I know this now, because I can no longer hold eye contact with the ones I love, the ones who praise my morals, my virtues, my successes, the children who listen closely when I offered guidance. They see a person of principle. I see something else, a hesitation, a silence that grows heavier each year. I remember the moment my conscience left. It did not slam the door. It simply asked a question I chose not to answer. And when morning came, I went to work anyway. Now I move through the world like polished glass, clear enough to admire and empty enough to sell. A person still standing in a good neighborhood with good schools and clean parks. But inside, I am only a bought shell, still learning how expensive silence can be. So, my devoted yellers, John is not unusual. He is not weak. He's not evil. He is ordinary. And that is precisely why systems like this endure. Most societies do not collapse because people are ignorant. They endure because people know just enough to feel the tension, but not enough to risk their stability. A society does not need to forget completely. It only needs to remember halfway. Which brings us back to the question that began this episode. Who benefits from civic amnesia? Not the worker on the line, not the customer trusting the label, not the town that built its parks and school around a shiny building. The beneficiary is always quieter than that. It is the structure that grows stronger every time a conscience hesitates. Because once you truly see what lives under the bed, it becomes much harder to go back to sleep. Think about what you know just enough of. This is Who Yelling Now? I shall see you in the next episode.